the First World War ended without peace. In 1918, the GUNS fell silent, but the world did not heal. Across Europe, the land lay shattered, its cities scarred, its fields poisoned by steel and gas. Empires collapsed not with dignity, but with exhaustion and humiliation. Millions of men returned home bearing bodies that no longer obeyed them, and minds that refused to forget the trenches. This was not victory. It was survival. The war had consumed an entire generation, leaving behind a silence heavier than artillery fire. Beneath the celebrations and treaties, resentment fermented. Borders were redrawn with careless ink, ignoring history, culture, and human cost. The peace imposed was brittle, born from vengeance rather than reconciliation. History watched without mercy, knowing that unresolved hatred does not fade. It waits. The Treaty of Versailles promised closure, but delivered bitterness. Germany was forced to kneel beneath clauses written in punishment, not peace. Its economy strangled, its pride shattered, its people told they alone carried the blame for a war that had engulfed continents. Hunger crept into homes, while anger crept into hearts. For civilians, the war never truly ended. Inflation erased savings overnight. Veterans begged in streets they once marched through in uniform. Children grew up listening to stories of betrayal rather than hope. Commanders and politicians spoke of stability, yet ignored the quiet screams of a population pushed beyond endurance. In the shadows of broken monuments, radical ideas began to take root. History remained silent, but attentive. Across Europe, the scars multiplied. France rebuilt while mourning its dead. Britain counted its losses in empty chairs and silent factories. Eastern Europe fractured into fragile new nations, their borders defended by fear rather than unity. The common soldier felt abandoned. He had survived machine guns and gas, only to be discarded by the peace he was promised. Many carried their discipline into extremist movements, believing order could only be forged through force. Civilians sensed the tension tightening like a drawn wire. Newspapers spoke of recovery, but streets whispered of revenge. The memory of war was not a warning. It was a lesson misread. History, patient and cold, prepared the next chapter. The 1920s arrived draped in the illusion of recovery. Cities pulsed with music and light, attempting to drown out memory with noise. Cafes filled, factories reopened, and nations convinced themselves that prosperity had returned. Yet beneath the surface, the wounds of the Great War remained raw. For many soldiers, peace was an unfamiliar battlefield. Nightmares replaced gunfire. Silence became unbearable. The war had trained men to obey, to endure, to kill, but never taught them how to live again. Civilians watched veterans drift between pride and despair. The uniform that once commanded respect now provoked discomfort. Society moved forward, leaving behind those who had sacrificed the most. History observed the masquerade, knowing denial is never permanent. Economic stability proved fragile. When global markets collapsed, the thin veil of recovery tore apart. Factories closed. Bread lines lengthened. Hunger returned to streets that had barely recovered from war. For civilians, desperation replaced hope. Parents skipped meals so children could eat. For veterans, the collapse confirmed their darkest belief, that their suffering had been meaningless. Political extremism fed on this despair. Promises of national rebirth and restored honor echoed through rallies and newspapers. The language was familiar. Strength, sacrifice, enemies within. History had heard these words before. The war has ended, but peace does not arrive gently. In 1919, Europe stands in ruins. Cities broken, empires collapsed, millions dead. Into this exhausted world comes a promise. A treaty meant to end all wars. At the Palace of Versailles, beneath chandeliers untouched by shellfire, victors gather to redraw the fate of nations. They speak of justice, order, and stability. Yet outside these halls, the soil is still soaked with blood, and the silence of the dead presses against every word. For the defeated, especially Germany, this is not a negotiation. It is a summons. The guns have fallen silent, but another weapon is being prepared. Ink on paper, sharp as any blade. History watches quietly as the foundations of fragile peace are laid upon grief, fear, and unresolved rage. Inside Versailles, the atmosphere is cold, formal, and unforgiving. The victors, France, Britain, and their allies, arrive not merely as diplomats, but as survivors carrying fresh wounds. France remembers its devastated fields and lost sons. Britain fears another war that could shatter its empire. Their leaders believe security can only come through punishment. Germany's representatives are kept waiting, isolated, humiliated. They are denied meaningful discussion. They are told to listen, to accept, and to sign. No German army marches here. No flags fly in defiance. Only silence, heavy with shame. This is peace dictated by power, not reconciliation. History records a moment when compromise dies quietly, unnoticed by those who believe force alone can guarantee stability. The terms are severe, written with the certainty of victors who believe they control the future. Germany is declared solely responsible for the war. With a single clause, an entire nation is burdened with guilt. Territories are stripped away. Borders are redrawn without regard for culture or memory. Millions wake to find themselves foreigners in their own homes. The army is reduced, weapons confiscated, pride dismantled piece by piece. Reparations are demanded, vast sums no shattered economy can realistically pay. For ordinary Germans, the treaty is not an abstract document. It means hunger, unemployment, and humiliation. Peace has arrived, but it feels indistinguishable from defeat without end. Across Germany, the effects are immediate and brutal. Factories slow, then stop. Currency weakens, then collapses. Veterans return home not as heroes, but as burdens in a nation stripped of purpose. They carry invisible wounds, memories of trenches, gas, and endless loss, now joined by bitterness. Civilians line up for bread that grows scarcer by the day. Children learn hunger before they learn hope. Every unpaid reparation installment deepens the sense of collective punishment. The treaty was meant to prevent another war. Instead, it plants resentment into daily life. History watches as suffering quietly transforms into anger, and anger waits patiently for a voice. Beyond Germany, the treaty reshapes the world in unstable ways. New nations are born from fallen empires, their borders fragile and contested. Ethnic groups are divided, rivals forced together. Old grudges resurface under new flags. Peace conferences end, but local conflicts begin almost immediately. The League of Nations is created to safeguard the future. Its intentions are noble, its power limited. Without unity or enforcement, warnings are spoken but rarely acted upon. The world congratulates itself on ending the Great War. Yet beneath ceremonies and speeches, the ground shifts. History senses that the silence between wars is not peace, but preparation. Years pass, but the wounds of Versailles do not heal. They fester. Economic collapse deepens despair. Political extremism finds fertile ground in anger and fear. Promises of restored pride begin to sound like salvation. For soldiers who survived one war, the idea of another feels unthinkable. Yet history is relentless. Unresolved injustice becomes fuel. Humiliation becomes ideology. The treaty that was meant to close a chapter instead leaves it unfinished. When the next war comes, it will not arrive by accident. It will rise from decisions made in quiet rooms, long after the guns first fell silent. Versailles promised peace. What it delivered was a pause, heavy with vengeance, waiting to explode.